I knew the moment I hit the floor that the fall wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the smile on my daughter-in-law's face. Not wide, not cruel, just a small, satisfied curve at the corner of her mouth, the kind people make when something inconvenient finally resolves itself. I saw it through the blur, through the pain in my hip, through the dull ringing in my ears, and as I lay on the cold wooden steps, the only clear thought I had was, so that's how little my life weighs in her eyes. I didn't scream. At 67, pain feels almost familiar, like an old neighbor that barges in without knocking. But humiliation, that one I never learned to tolerate. I tried to push myself up with my hands, but they trembled under me, useless. My leg refused to cooperate. My breath came out shallow. "Are you all right?" Melissa's voice floated down from the landing, too smooth, too calm. She didn't rush. She didn't kneel. She didn't even sound surprised, just curious, mildly amused. I need a moment," I managed to say, tasting dust. "Of course," she replied, tapping her nails lightly on the railing. The sound was steady, rhythmic, almost bored. These stairs really are dangerous. "We've talked about that, remember?" No, she talked about it. And she didn't mention danger back then, only how women of my age should consider moving somewhere without stairs, for everyone's peace of mind. My son, Daniel, had nodded along the way. Tired men nod to their wives, thinking they're choosing harmony over conflict. I didn't blame him then. Now, I wasn't so sure. The pain sharpened, a thin, hot line shooting from my hip into my ribs. I shifted, and the world tilted. Melissa stepped down 2 steps, not to help me, but to get a better view. "I'll call Daniel," she said, already pulling out her phone. "He'll want to know you fell. It's really concerning, Margaret. Honestly, I've been saying it for months." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "It was an accident." She smiled again, a faint, victorious smile. "Yes, exactly. An accident." I closed my eyes for a second. I thought of my husband, gone these 12 years, of the home we built together, one paycheck at a time, of these stairs he varnished every spring, even when arthritis stiffened his fingers. I thought of how I used to run up and down them carrying laundry baskets twice my size when Daniel was small. Daniel, my only child. The boy who once cried when he scraped his knee and begged me not to leave his side. The man who now needed his wife's permission to decide how much space I was allowed to take in the world. Melissa finally crouched, but not close enough to touch me. Close enough only to observe. "You really shouldn't live alone anymore," she murmured. "This proves it." No. This proved something else entirely. But the pain was too sharp for me to argue. I breathed slowly, letting the dizziness settle enough to move. "Help me up," I said quietly. "Oh." She blinked once, as if the idea had only just occurred to her. Right. Her hands were cool, reluctant. She grasped my elbow, not to support me, but to guide me like fragile cargo that might crumble if handled with care. I pushed myself up, using the railing, my jaw clenched. Once I stood on steadier footing, Melissa stepped back immediately, as if proximity to me might stain her. "I'll tell Daniel to come by tonight," she said, adjusting her sweater. "We need to discuss next steps." "Next steps," I repeated, forcing my breath to even out. "Yes, living arrangements, safety, responsibility." That last word lingered, accusation disguised as concern. I nodded slowly, though inside something was shifting. A quiet, unfamiliar movement, like a heavy door creaking open after years of rust. Pain has a way of sharpening truth, and the truth was this. I had ignored too many signs, forgiven too many tones. swallowed too many small humiliations for the sake of keeping peace that no longer existed. Melissa looked almost pleased with my silence, as if she interpreted it as surrender. She didn't know me. Not really. I gripped the railing, steadying myself. I felt the bruise blossoming beneath my skin, the ache settling into my bones. But there was something else, too. A steadiness, a clarity. Accident or not, this fall had shown me the truth I'd been reluctant to name. In this house, my own house, I was becoming a guest who overstayed her welcome. And something in me, something older and stronger than pain, refused to accept that. I took a careful step forward, one hand still on the railing, the other pressed to my ribs, feeling the tender throb. Melissa was already halfway down the hallway, phone against her ear, her voice brightening at the sound of Daniel picking up. Her shoulders straightened, her steps lighter, almost triumphant. I stood there for a moment, alone on the staircase, breathing through the pain, letting each second settle inside me. The bruise would heal. But what her smile revealed, that would take longer to mend. I made my way down the last step slowly, one foot at a time, and reached the bottom just as Melissa said, "Yes, Daniel." She fell again. I didn't correct her. The pain was loud, but my resolve was louder. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that had nothing to do with fear. I felt myself coming back. By evening, the bruise had spread across my hip like a dark, blooming shadow. I moved slowly, leaning on the kitchen counter to steady myself while the kettle hissed. The house felt different, quieter than usual, though it had always been quiet. Maybe it was me who had changed. Maybe silence had never felt this heavy before. Melissa had left shortly after the call to Daniel, promising he would handle everything. She said it with the same tone you use when talking about fixing a broken appliance. I watched her walk out the door without a backward glance. She didn't ask if I needed help making dinner. Didn't check whether I could get up the stairs to my bedroom. She simply left. I didn't try the stairs again. Not that night. I slept in the recliner in the living room, wrapped in an old quilt that still carried the faint scent of cedar from the closet. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see the fall. I saw her smile. That small, satisfied curve. It settled into my memory like dust into a crack. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. Daniel arrived the next morning, earlier than I expected. He didn't knock. He never knocked anymore. He walked in calling, "Mom?" As if I were the one intruding in his space, not the other way around. "I'm in here," I answered. He stepped into the living room, took one look at me, and let out a sigh that wasn't concern. It was frustration. "Why didn't you call me last night? I told Melissa to stay with you, but she said you insisted on being alone." I watched him put his hands on his hips, the way he used to when lecturing his children. "I didn't insist on anything, Daniel. She left because she wanted to go." He frowned slightly, that familiar crease forming between his brows. A crease he'd gotten from me. "Mom, please don't make this more complicated. Melissa said you were shaken up and didn't want anyone fussing. She was trying to respect your wishes." I didn't argue. I didn't trust my voice not to crack, and I wouldn't give either of them the satisfaction of seeing me shaken. Instead, I shifted, and pain shot up my side. Daniel finally noticed. "Let me see," he murmured, kneeling to look at my bruised hip. For a moment, he was the boy I remembered, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and say they were special flowers for special people. But the moment passed quickly. "This isn't good," he said. "You're getting older, Mom. These falls, they're signs." You can't keep living like nothing's changed. I had one fall, I said quietly. No, Daniel corrected. You had another fall. Melissa told me about the one last winter. That wasn't a fall. I slipped on the doormat because you tracked snow inside. He blinked, caught between memory and the version Melissa had given him. Perhaps it was easier for him not to sort out the difference. He sighed again. Mom, Melissa and I just want what's best for you. This house. He looked around, as if seeing it for the first time. It's too big, too old, too many hazards. For whom? I asked. For you? For her? Or for me? Daniel shook his head, already tired of me. For all of us. If something happens to you, we're responsible. You understand that, right? It's not safe for you to be alone anymore. I let his words settle. Safe, responsible, concern. They were familiar terms, ones Melissa used often, like a script she'd rehearsed. He continued, Melissa and I have been looking at assisted living options, places where you'd have help, where you wouldn't risk injuring yourself. There's one just 15 minutes away from our house. It's beautiful, really. The ache in my hip was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. You've already been looking? I asked softly. Daniel hesitated just long enough for me to know the truth. We wanted to be prepared, that's all. Prepared. To move me. To remove me. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. Daniel, I'm not leaving my home. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, the same way Melissa often did. Mom, be reasonable. You're getting older. Things happen. You have to be practical. I wanted to tell him that practicality had raised him, that practicality had kept the lights on when his father died, that practicality had sent him to college, paid for his textbooks, helped with his first down payment. But I knew he'd forgotten all that. Not out of malice, out of convenience. Let's just talk about it later, he said, standing. I'll drive you to your appointment this afternoon. Melissa scheduled it. My appointment? With the doctor. To assess your mobility and, well, everything. Everything, I repeated. Daniel bent to kiss my forehead, but his lips only brushed the air inches above me. Then he hurried out, already on his phone with Melissa, reporting back like a man giving updates to his supervisor. When the door shut behind him, the house fell silent again. I exhaled slowly. The pain in my hip pulsed, steady as a clock. But beneath it, something else pulsed too, calmer, older, deeper. Not defiance, not anger, clarity. For the first time in years, I was beginning to see my life with the lights on. I reached for my cane, one I rarely used, and traced its smooth wooden handle with my fingers. My husband carved it for me when I turned 60. For when you need a little help, he'd said. Not control, not supervision. Help. The kind that doesn't come with strings. I pressed my palm against the chair and slowly stood. Every movement hurt, but movement was still mine, my choice, my pace. Outside, a cold wind rustled the last of the autumn leaves. Inside, I felt the same shift, something loosening, something falling away. Not me, something around me. And though I didn't say the words aloud, I felt them clearly. This house is still mine, and so am I. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and old magazines, the kind that curl at the corners from too many anxious hands. I sat in the waiting room, while Daniel filled out forms at the counter, like a man arranging paperwork for a fragile shipment. He didn't ask if I wanted help. He simply assumed I needed it. Maybe that stung even more than the fall. A nurse called my name. I stood slowly, testing my weight on my injured side. The pain was sharp but familiar now. Something I could navigate. Daniel hovered behind me, one hand half extended, unsure whether to touch me or let me manage alone. Melissa had taught him that kind of hesitation. Dr. Chen greeted me warmly, though her eyes flicked to the bruise blooming beneath my skirt hem. "Let's start with the fall," she said, gesturing toward the examination table. "Tell me exactly what happened." I told her. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. I didn't mention Melissa's smile, though it tried to claw its way out of my throat. Dr. Chen examined my hip, pressed gently along the bone, and nodded. "It's a painful bruise, but no fracture. You were lucky, Margaret." Lucky. That word had never felt so heavy. She asked about dizziness, confusion, memory lapses. I answered clearly, steadily, watching her check boxes on her chart. Daniel sat in the corner, arms crossed, as if he already expected the results to confirm whatever Melissa had planted in his mind. "And cognitively," the doctor said, "you're perfectly sound. No signs of impairment." Daniel looked up. Just a flicker of surprise, but a flicker was enough. Dr. Chen continued. "Your fall appears to be exactly what you described. An accident. Stairs can be hazardous, especially with the glossy finish yours have. A simple slip." I felt warmth rise in my chest. Not pride. Validation. Someone believed my version of my own life. But Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Are you sure? She's had other close calls." "No," I cut in gently. "I've had other winters. Big difference." Dr. Chen glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Margaret is fully capable of living independently. With a cane for support while she heals, she should be fine. No medical need for assisted care at this time." At this time. Doctors always choose careful words, but even in her caution, the meaning was clear. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't failing. Daniel rubbed his forehead, the way he does when something disrupts the narrative he's already settled into. "Well, okay. But we still need to talk about long-term safety." I felt myself stiffen, but Dr. Chen stepped in. "Long-term decisions should respect the patient's autonomy, and Margaret is fully capable of making her own." He nodded politely, but I could see Melissa's shadow behind his eyes. He wasn't convinced. After the exam, the nurse handed me written instructions, though I didn't need them. Rest, ice, careful movement. I'd managed worse before. Grief, poverty, loneliness. Bruises heal. The other things just settle deeper. When we reached the parking lot, Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, this doesn't change the fact that we're worried." "No," I said quietly. "It only changes the fact that you're wrong." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Silence stretched between us, thin and fragile, like a sheet of frost. "I'll check on you tonight," he said, and I heard the unspoken Melissa told me to. "I'll be fine," I answered. He drove away, and I stood there for a moment, letting the wind cool the ache in my hip. The sky was gray, the kind of dull winter sky that never fully brightens. But strangely, I felt lighter than I had in days. Because someone had finally spoken the truth aloud. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't incapable. And I wasn't as alone as Melissa hoped I'd feel. But something else settled inside me too. A quiet warning, sharp and steady. People don't smile the way she did unless they already have a plan. And I had a feeling that my fall was only the beginning of hers. Daniel stopped by that evening just as I expected. Not with flowers, not with dinner, but with a tone already shaped by someone else's voice. He stood in the doorway, shoulders tense, hands buried in his coat pockets. He used to come inside without thinking. Now he waited for an invitation, as if politeness could mask the purpose of his visit. "Mom," he said, exhaling sharply, "we need to talk." There it was. His favorite phrase when the real voice behind him wasn't his own. "Come in then," I replied, stepping aside. He walked past me, scanning the living room the way people do when they're looking for confirmation of their fears, or the justification for them. The cushions slightly askew, a blanket on the recliner, the cane leaning near the armrest. To him, each item was another argument in Melissa's arsenal. He sat, but he didn't relax. "I spoke with Melissa. She's really worried about you." "I've noticed," I said quietly. He didn't catch the tone, or he chose not to. "She thinks you're minimizing the fall. And honestly, I think you are too. You could have broken your hip, Mom. You were alone. Anything could have happened." I folded my hands in my lap. "It was an accident, Daniel." The doctor confirmed that. He waved this away, not angrily, but impatiently. Doctors look at the medical side. They don't consider the bigger picture. You're getting older. Things change. Age again. It always came down to that. A lifetime of strength reduced to a number. "Melissa thinks it's time to plan ahead," he went on. "We can't just wait for something worse to happen." I let out a slow breath. "Tell me what Melissa thinks, since that seems to matter more than what I think." He paused, just a flicker, but long enough for me to know I had struck something true. "She thinks," he said carefully, "that the house is too much for you. The stairs, the yard, even the kitchen. There are hazards everywhere. And she's right. I don't want to see you hurt, Mom. I can't go through that again. Again." He said it as if he had been the one lying in pain on the floor. "Assisted living isn't what it used to be," he continued. "They're beautiful places now. Activities, meals, safety. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. Except losing my independence, my home, my dignity." "Daniel," I murmured, "do you hear yourself? You're talking as if I were helpless." "You fell," he insisted. "People fall," I countered. "You fell off the porch when you were 10. I didn't try to move you to a safer home." "That's not the same. It feels the same to me." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was holding himself together. "Mom, I love you, and I want to help you before anything worse happens." "I know you love me," I said softly. "But I don't think you see me anymore. You see whatever Melissa tells you to." His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in shame he didn't want to name. "She's not the enemy," he muttered. "I never said she was. But you act like she wants to control your life." I looked at him steadily. "Doesn't she?" Silence stretched between us. He didn't answer because he couldn't. Not honestly. He rubbed his palms together, restless. "I'm just asking you to consider it," he said finally. "For your own good. My own good." The phrase tasted metallic. I pushed myself up slowly, testing the steadiness of my legs. "Daniel, when I need help, I will ask for it. But I am not a problem that needs solving." He followed me with his eyes, and for a moment I saw the uncertainty flicker again. The boy in the man, confused by love, twisted into fear. "Mom, please don't make this harder." "I'm not the one making it hard." He stood abruptly. "I'll talk to Melissa. We'll figure out something." I nodded, though his words didn't reassure me. "Drive safe, Daniel." He left without another word, closing the door behind him with the heaviness of a man caught between two loyalties, and unsure which one benefits him more. I sank back into my chair, my body aching, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. Daniel wasn't cruel. He wasn't heartless. But he was weak where Melissa was strong. And weakness in the hands of the wrong person can do more damage than malice ever could. Outside, the evening darkened. shadows stretching across the walls like long fingers. I wrapped the quilt tighter around my shoulders and let the quiet settle. They were planning something. I could feel it. And for the first time, I admitted to myself, I needed to be ready. 2 days passed, and not once did Melissa bring the children by. That alone wasn't unusual. She always had reasons ready, small, polished excuses she thought sounded thoughtful. But this time, the silence was different. Intentional. Calculated. Even the kids' usual text messages didn't come, and it wasn't like them to forget. I sat at the kitchen table after dinner, waiting for the pot of tea to steep, when my phone buzzed. My heart gave a tiny, hopeful jump. My granddaughter Chloe, maybe. She had her grandfather's tender way of checking on people. But the screen showed Melissa's name. "We're keeping the kids home this week," the message read. "They don't need to see you while you're still unstable after the fall." Unstable. That word hit harder than the staircase. I read it twice, then a third time. She didn't bother with warmth, not even a polite patting around the insult. Just the blunt suggestion that I was unsafe to be around my own grandchildren. I typed slowly. "I'm fine." The doctor cleared me, then erased it. Melissa didn't write messages to discuss. She wrote them to define the situation. I set the phone down and inhaled deeply, letting the rising steam from the kettle ease the tightness in my chest. Outside, children laughed somewhere down the street. My window was cracked open just enough for the sound to float in. Light, careless voices. The kind that had once filled this house every Sunday afternoon. I'd always believed you could measure the health of a family by the sound of its children. Lately, mine were getting quieter. That evening, Daniel called, the conversation stiff and quick. "Melissa thinks it's better to give you space while you recover," he said, as though the idea weren't absurd. "I don't need space from the children." "They'll come by next week," he replied, not committing to anything. "Let's just take things slowly." "Slow for whom?" I asked. He didn't answer. When he hung up, I stared at the quiet phone in my hand, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. They were isolating me. A classic tactic. Distance the problem, then redefine the narrative around her absence. I had watched enough of Melissa's patterns to recognize when something was shifting into place. The next morning, wanting some air, I stepped onto the porch with my cane and eased myself down the steps. The sky was pale and cloudless, the kind of brittle cold that prickles the cheeks. As I made my way down the walkway, I heard a familiar voice call out. "Margaret, is that really you walking around on your own?" It was my neighbor, Audrey Bennett, a widow in her 70s with a sharp gaze and a sharper tongue. She crossed the street toward me, grocery bag in hand. "I heard about your fall," she said. "Melissa told Patrice at the salon. Sounded like she made it seem a lot worse than it was." I snorted softly. "I'm fine. Just bruised." Audrey studied me for a moment, narrowing her eyes. "You look steady enough. Better than Melissa described." Of course she did. Melissa had a way of painting pictures with just enough truth to hide the intention behind them. "She's been very insistent," Audrey went on, lowering her voice. "Told Patrice she's worried you can't manage anymore, that Daniel's under a lot of stress because of you." Stress. Another word that didn't belong to me, yet was suddenly pinned onto my shoulders. I thanked Audrey and made my way back inside, once the cold began to seep through my coat. Her words stayed with me long after I settled into my chair. By late afternoon, I started noticing another change, small but unmistakable. Messages from my grandchildren that normally came daily didn't. Chloe always sent me photos of her drawings. Evan liked to show me whatever Lego monstrosity he'd built. Nothing. I opened our group chat. The last message was mine, 2 days ago, a simple good night. No replies. Children don't stay silent on their own. Someone instructs them. I pressed a hand against my ribs, not from physical pain, but from the ache of something older, something that comes when people you love begin quietly turning away from you. As evening approached, Melissa sent another message, this time with the precision of a woman laying bricks for a future argument. Daniel and I think it's best to limit visits for a while. The kids get upset when they see you struggling. It's confusing for them. We'll revisit this when you're more stable. Stable again, as if I were a table with loose legs. I put the phone face down on the counter. The house felt unfamiliar. Same furniture, same walls, same blankets folded neatly on the back of the sofa. But it didn't feel like mine tonight. Not fully. Something had shifted, and I could sense it as clearly as the cold air sneaking under the door. They weren't just keeping the children away. They were preparing the story that would justify keeping them away permanently. I poured a cup of tea, held it between my palms, and let the warmth settle into my bones. I had spent my whole life being careful, quiet, reasonable. But now I understood something I hadn't let myself face before. Melissa wasn't waiting for me to fail. She was building the case that I already had, and I wasn't going to let her finish it without a fight. Melissa chose Sunday dinner for her next move. She always preferred these soft light moments when Daniel felt nostalgic and open to suggestion, when the children were quiet with their homework and she could steer the whole family with a gentle hand on the wheel. I arrived with a tin of oatmeal cookies, still warm, and Melissa accepted them as if they were a mildly inconvenient delivery she hadn't ordered. "Come sit," she said brightly. "We've been talking about something important." Daniel gave me a small smile, apologetic, tired, already defeated. It told me the conversation had begun long before I walked through the door. We sat at the table. Chloe and Evan were sent upstairs to finish their reading, though they were already done. Melissa didn't want witnesses. She poured herself water with an air of ceremony, then folded her hands. "Margaret," she began, "we've had a thought about how to make things easier for you." Whenever she said for you, she meant for us. I waited. "These last couple of weeks have shown us how fragile things can become," she continued. "Illness, falls, unexpected issues. It's a lot for one person to manage alone." "I'm managing," I said. She smiled like someone indulging a stubborn child. "Of course you are. But Daniel and I feel it's time to think responsibly about your future. We want to lighten the burden on you." Daniel cleared his throat. "We don't want you to worry about bills or paperwork or, well, anything that could slip through the cracks." There it was. They always approached it slowly, like wading into cold water. Melissa leaned forward, eyes soft with rehearsed concern. "So we've been talking to a consultant about a financial power of attorney." Daniel winced slightly, as if he'd hoped she'd phrase it more gently. Melissa continued smoothly. "It would let Daniel handle your accounts, your decisions, your home maintenance, everything. You wouldn't have to stress about managing things anymore." "I'm not stressed," I said quietly. Melissa waved this off. "Everyone gets stressed, Margaret. Daniel's just better equipped now. And this fall, well, it tells us we shouldn't delay important decisions." I watched her carefully. Everything in her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert, calculating. She had been waiting for this opening for years. My fall had given her the perfect wedge. Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, it's just a precaution. It doesn't mean you're incapable. It's just so we can help." "And what would you do with that authority?" I asked. Melissa answered before he could. "Exactly what you'd want. Pay your bills. Maintain the house. Handle emergencies. And eventually, when the time comes, make arrangements for a safer living situation. Eventually. When the time comes." Words as soft as velvet covering the hard shape underneath. I sat back, folding my hands slowly, deliberately. "You want control of my home." Melissa didn't blink. "We want stability for everyone, and frankly, Margaret. Daniel is stretched thin, trying to keep up with your needs." Daniel looked down at his plate, guilt and discomfort warring across his face. "You asked me to consider assisted living," I reminded them. Melissa nodded. "Just consider. And the power of attorney would allow Daniel to handle the transition when you're ready. You won't have to worry about paperwork." "It's an act of love, Margaret. Love." She used that word like seasoning, sparingly, only when it served her dish. I looked at Daniel. "Do you think I'm incapable of managing my own life?" He hesitated. "Too long. I think it's harder for you now." "And what part is harder for me? Speaking, thinking, paying my bills, or simply disagreeing with your wife?" Melissa stiffened, but only slightly. "This isn't an attack, Margaret. We're trying to help you before things get worse." "Worse?" I asked. "Or less convenient?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel shifted, caught between us. I stood slowly, leaning on the table for balance. "Thank you for dinner, but I'll keep my decisions, and my home, for myself." Melissa's voice sharpened, barely disguised under sweetness. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I met her eyes, calm as stone. "Not for me." I turned toward the door. Behind me, the room stayed painfully silent. It was the silence of a plan interrupted, not abandoned. I didn't plan to tell anyone, not out of shame, but out of exhaustion. Some battles feel too old to speak aloud. But life has a way of placing the right person in your path when you most need them, even if you don't realize you need anyone at all. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was trimming the dead stems off my rose bushes, moving slowly but deliberately, when I heard a familiar voice calling from the sidewalk. "Margaret? Are you out here ruining those poor roses again?" It was Ruth, my oldest friend in the neighborhood, 74, blunt as sandpaper, and loyal in a way few people ever are. We'd shared coffee, secrets, and the quiet misery of widowhood for years. She knew how to read me better than most. I straightened with some effort. "They're not ruined. They're disciplined." "Oh, please," she snorted. "You prune them like you're preparing them for military service." She came closer, eyes narrowing as she noticed the stiffness in my posture. "You're moving like someone twice your age. What happened?" I opened my mouth to give the easy answer, but the real one slipped out before I could stop it. "I fell." Her whole expression changed. "You fell? When? How?" I hesitated. A strange, brittle fear fluttered in my chest, not fear of the fall, but fear of saying too much, because once spoken, truth becomes harder to ignore. But Ruth didn't look away, didn't soften her gaze out of pity. She simply waited, arms crossed, ready to fight whatever enemy I named. So I told her. Not everything. Not Melissa's smile. Not the power of attorney talk. Not the silent erasure of my place in the family. But enough. Enough for her to understand something was wrong. When I finished, Ruth let out a low, sharp breath. "And Melissa just watched you fall?" "It was an accident," I said quickly. "She didn't cause it." "But she enjoyed it," Ruth countered. "I can hear it in your voice." I didn't deny it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Margaret, I've been waiting years for you to see what that woman is, She's never liked that Daniel still cares about you, and she wants control of him, of the money, of everything with your name on it. Her words hit with the dull accuracy of truth I already knew but hadn't allowed myself to say. She told people at the salon that you're declining, Ruth added, as if she's preparing them for something. For what exactly? I closed my eyes. If Melissa had been spreading that kind of narrative, then this wasn't spontaneous concern. It was groundwork. Ruth touched my arm lightly. You listen to me. Manipulative people like her, they start by making others doubt themselves. Then they cut off family. Then they get access to your accounts. I've seen it with 2 neighbors already. I opened my eyes. Daniel would never knowingly, she interrupted. But he trusts his wife more than he trusts his own judgment. And she knows that. Her certainty sent a chill through me. The truth was, I didn't need to be convinced. I had felt the shift long before this fall, little changes, subtle corrections, a slow reshaping of what I was allowed to say or feel. Melissa never pushed hard. She didn't need to. She only needed Daniel to lean slightly in her direction. Over time, the slight becomes a slope. Ruth squeezed my arm again. You must protect yourself, Margaret. Not from the fall, from the fallout. I swallowed. Protect myself how? First, stop telling them everything. Second, get your papers in order. Third, don't sign anything they bring you, no matter how sweetly they smile. She paused. And fourth, don't try to handle this alone. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, streaked with silver. Her mouth was set in that stubborn line I'd come to adore, and in her eyes was something fierce, protective, uncompromising. She wasn't just giving advice. She was giving warning. You understand me? She asked. I nodded slowly. Yes, and I meant it, because for the first time since the fall, I realized something important. The danger wasn't the stairs. It was the story Melissa was writing about me, and it was time I stopped letting her hold the pen. I didn't sleep much after my talk with Ruth. Not from fear. Fear is sharp and quick, like a needle. What I felt was heavier, slower, something that settles in your bones when you finally stop pretending things are fine. I lay awake, listening to the old pipes hum through the walls, the same pipes Daniel once helped his father repair when he was barely tall enough to hold the wrench. The quiet made the memories softer, but it made the reality clearer. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I called the attorney who handled my husband's estate 13 years ago, a calm man named Mr. Porter, whose voice always sounded like he carried a lantern through whatever darkness his clients wandered into. He answered on the 3rd ring. Mrs. Hale, it's been a long time. Yes, I said. Too long, maybe. What can I help you with? I hesitated for a moment. This was the line you cross when you stop being hopeful and start being practical. I need to review my documents, and I need to understand what protections I still have. He paused, picking up something in my tone that I hadn't intended to reveal. Are you facing any pressure from family members? I let out a slow breath. Not directly. Not legally. Not yet. That means soon, he murmured. Come in this afternoon. We'll talk. I hung up, feeling strangely lighter, not safe, but anchored. It's a small thing, knowing someone stands between you and the intentions of those who smile at you while moving the chess pieces behind your back. Before I left for the appointment, I decided to gather a few things: a copy of my will, the deed to the house, bank statements. I reached for the file drawer and noticed something odd. The stack of utility bills was slightly rearranged. Nothing was missing, but someone had thumbed through them. Someone who didn't live here. Daniel had stopped by the day before, just to check on me. He might have wandered through the kitchen, might have opened drawers looking for scissors, tape, anything. Or maybe he hadn't been wandering at all. Trust breaks slowly, then all at once. At the attorney's office, the waiting room smelled of lemon polish and old carpet. Mr. Porter welcomed me with that same steady warmth as always. He sat across from me at a polished wooden table while I told him everything except Melissa's smile. Some things I still couldn't force myself to say aloud. He listened without interrupting, just nodding occasionally, taking notes. When I finished, he folded his hands. Mrs. Hale, what you're describing is a pattern we see often. Subtle pressure, reframing of events, attempts to limit your contact with others. It usually precedes a petition for guardianship or power of attorney. I felt my stomach tighten. Hearing the words from him, not my fears, not Ruth's suspicions, hit differently. But, he continued, you are entirely competent. The doctor's report confirms it, and unless there is evidence of cognitive decline or danger to yourself, no court will grant them control. I exhaled slowly. And if they try anyway? He opened a folder and slid it toward me. Then we prepare. You update your will. Clarify your healthcare directives. And if necessary, we establish a trust that cannot be touched without your explicit consent. I touched the folder lightly. It felt heavier than paper. Also, he added, start documenting everything. Dates, comments, decisions they try to make for you. These patterns matter in court. Court. The word felt unreal, like something happening to another family in another town. But Melissa had already crossed the threshold of what decent people do. And Daniel, my sweet boy with the scraped knees and the dandelions, walked behind her with his head down, trusting the hand that led him. Before I left, Mr. Porter said one last thing. You're not alone in this, and you're not powerless. The words settled into me like warm stones. On the way home, the sky was the color of tin, low and heavy. I walked into my house, and closed the door behind me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a woman standing on the edge of something dangerous. I felt like a woman preparing. I didn't go digging for evidence. I wasn't hunting for secrets or trying to catch anyone in a lie. At 67, you don't go looking for trouble. Life hands you enough without asking. But sometimes truth arrives quietly, without warning, like a letter slipped under the door. In my case, it arrived as a voice. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I'd misplaced my reading glasses, again, and went searching through drawers in the hallway cabinet. At the very bottom, beneath a stack of old receipts and batteries that probably no longer worked, I found a small digital recorder. I hadn't seen it in years. It belonged to my husband once. He used it to record notes when he was repairing things around the house. I held it for a moment, remembering the warm rumble of his voice. Out of habit more than curiosity, I pressed play. The first few seconds were static. Then, Melissa's voice. Clear, sharp, crisp. I'm telling you, this fall was a blessing. She'll finally have to admit she can't manage on her own. My breath caught in my throat. I stood completely still, afraid even the sound of air moving might change what I was hearing. Another voice, my son's, came next, uncertain, quieter. Melissa, don't say it like that. She got hurt. She got bruised, Melissa corrected, her tone dismissive. And frankly, we needed an example. Something that shows everyone she isn't safe by herself. Now we have it. I sat down slowly on the bench by the door, recorder trembling in my hand. Daniel whispered. "I don't like talking about my mother this way." "Then stop making me do it," she snapped. "I'm trying to protect our family. You know what happens if she has a serious accident? We're responsible, legally, financially, emotionally. All of it would land on us." She paused, then added in a softer, coaxing voice. "You said yourself she's getting forgetful." "I didn't say forgetful," Daniel replied. "I said she repeats things sometimes." Melissa's tone brightened, almost triumphant. "Exactly. Patterns. And now the fall. We can show the court she's declining." Court. The word felt like a blow. Daniel's voice wavered. "Do you really think it'll come to that?" "It has to," Melissa said simply. "If she won't sign the power of attorney, then we'll petition for guardianship. And honestly, after this fall, it shouldn't be hard." I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking. Not from age, not from pain, but from a kind of grief so deep it didn't even have edges. It simply spread, swallowing everything it touched. My son hadn't said much on the recording, but he hadn't stopped her either. That silence of his hurt more than her words, more than the fall, more than the smile. I pressed play again, needing to be absolutely sure. Melissa's voice returned, sharp as broken glass. "She's lived her life. Now she needs to stop making ours harder. The sooner we take control, the better." Those words stayed in the air long after I switched the recorder off. I set it in my lap and closed my eyes. It felt strange, strangely clarifying, to hear the truth spoken aloud rather than whispered behind closed doors. Strange to feel validation and heartbreak arrive in the same moment. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. There was a plan, a strategy. A roadmap with one goal: remove me from my home and my life while keeping their hands clean. I opened my eyes and stared at the recorder, its metal surface catching a sliver of afternoon sun. This wasn't just evidence. It was the line, the moment where hope ends and resolve begins. I stood slowly, placing the recorder in a drawer where I could reach it easily, not hidden, not forgotten. Ready. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, my mind felt steady, clear, almost sharp. They wanted to build a case. Very well. So would I. The letter arrived on a gray morning, the kind where the sky looks like damp wool stretched too thin. I wasn't expecting mail. My bills come electronically, and my friends prefer calling to writing. So when I saw the thick envelope with the county seal stamped in blue, a chill moved through me. I knew before I opened it. I knew before my fingers even touched the paper. Inside was the official notice. A petition has been filed requesting a determination of incapacity and the appointment of a guardian. I sat down slowly at the dining table, the letter trembling lightly in my hands. The room felt smaller somehow, as though the walls had leaned in to listen. My name was typed neatly at the top, my address below it, and then the words that sliced through me like ice. Petitioners: Daniel Hale and Melissa Hale. Not just Melissa, Daniel too. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I had prepared myself for the possibility. I had braced for Melissa's next move, for the strategy she'd hinted at in her recorded conversation. But seeing my son's name printed beside hers, that felt like a fracture. Something clean, something final. I read the petition again, line by line. They claimed I was unable to safely manage daily activities, that I had demonstrated confusion and impaired judgment, that I had suffered multiple falls, that I was in denial of my declining condition. Each sentence was a quiet assassination, gentle words sharpened into weapons. They didn't accuse me of madness. No, Melissa was smarter than that. She painted me as fragile, confused, kindly framed in helplessness. A woman who needed saving for her own good, the kind of story courts like. But I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't alone. I folded the papers and placed them deliberately on the wooden table. Then I called Mr. Porter. His voice was steady, but I heard the tension beneath it when I told him what arrived. "They moved quickly," he murmured. "This means they believe they can convince a judge without resistance." "Well," I said, "they'll have resistance." He didn't pretend optimism. He respected me too much for that. "We'll need to respond immediately. You'll attend the hearing. Bring the medical report. Bring the recorder. Bring anything that shows you are managing your life independently." I closed my eyes. "I never thought it would come to this." "No one ever does," he replied gently. "But guardianship petitions are often less about care and more about control." Control? Exactly the word I had been avoiding, even as the truth circled me like a hawk. After hanging up, I sat for a long time without moving. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels like a question. Did Daniel truly believe I needed this? Or did he simply believe Melissa needed him? I thought of his face at Sunday dinner, uneasy, conflicted, leaning toward the easier path rather than the right one. Melissa didn't need him to be cruel. She only needed him to drift. He drifted straight into this petition. The clock on the wall ticked softly, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the neighborhood children ran past the window, shouting and laughing, their energy careless and alive. Life continued while mine was being quietly redrawn. But I didn't feel defeated. Not now. The fall had frightened me. The smile had hurt me. But this petition, ignited something I hadn't felt in years. A kind of fire that comes when you realize someone is trying to erase you politely. I stood, slowly but steadily, and placed the letter in a folder beside the recorder. Evidence. Proof. Pieces of the truth they hoped I would never gather. As I closed the drawer, my reflection caught in the glass. Lined face, silver hair, eyes sharp with clarity. I wasn't the frail woman they were describing, and I would not go quietly into the world Melissa was trying to build for me. If she wanted a court to decide my future, then I would make sure the court heard my voice, not her smile. Preparing for a court hearing at 67 is not something you ever imagine doing, at least not against your own child. I moved through the days with a strange mix of calm and heaviness, like walking underwater. Yet beneath it all, there was a steady line of steel forming inside me, a line I didn't know I still possessed. Mr. Porter worked methodically. "Everything must be documented," he said. "Facts, not emotion." He didn't need to remind me. Emotion was the one thing Melissa was counting on, to make me look unstable, reactive, fragile. So I kept my voice steady and my steps careful, even when the bruise still ached in the mornings. We spread the documents across his desk. The medical report stating I was cognitively sound, photographs of the staircase, perfectly intact, bank statements showing bills paid on time, my planner, filled in every day with neat handwriting, and finally, the recorder. The moment he pressed play, the room changed. Melissa's voice filled the air, smooth, calculating, confident in its cruelty. Daniel's hesitant replies, his silence, the quiet surrender in him that she wore like jewelry. When the recording ended, Mr. Porter exhaled. "This," he said, tapping the device gently, "is your anchor. If Melissa intends to paint you as incapable, this will show the court her intent. Control, not concern." I nodded, but my throat was tight. Hearing Daniel's voice again in that conversation, not just agreeing but allowing, felt like losing him twice in one lifetime. When the judge hears this, he continued, the petition will crumble. I wanted to believe him, truly. But I had lived long enough to know people cling to the stories they want to be true, even when confronted with facts. Melissa wanted a helpless version of me. Daniel wanted peace in his marriage. Neither wanted the real woman I still was. That evening, I walked home slowly. The winter air was sharp, waking my senses with each breath. When I stepped inside the house, I paused. The quiet didn't smother me this time. It steadied me. This was my home, my walls, my floors, my history. I wouldn't give it up to someone who had never loved it. I pulled out a notebook Ruth had given me years ago, floral cover faded at the edges, and I wrote. Not feelings. I didn't need a diary. I wrote facts, dates, words Melissa used. Moments when Daniel looked away instead of standing beside me. I wrote until my hand cramped. By the time I closed the notebook, the first page nearly full, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just defense. This was reclaiming myself. Later, I called Ruth. She didn't ask how I was. She simply said, "When is the hearing? I'm coming with you." I smiled into the phone. "You don't have to." "Don't insult me," she replied. "I'm not letting you walk into a room where people try to dismantle you without someone in your corner." For the first time in weeks, warmth flooded me. Not safety, not comfort, but loyalty. A rare thing in old age. A rare thing in life. After we hung up, I went to the kitchen to make tea. As the kettle warmed, I caught my reflection in the dark window. A woman standing straight, shoulders squared, eyes still bright despite everything. The machine Melissa wanted to portray, a fragile, fading shadow, did not match the woman I saw. The hearing was days away. But I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were going to see me clearly. All of them, whether they wanted to or not. Courtrooms have their own kind of cold, not the sharp cold of winter air or the heavy cold of a lonely house. This was a quiet, polished cold that seeped from marble floors and stiff-backed benches, from the weight of rules and judgment. Ruth walked beside me, her arm looped through mine, steady as a handrail. Mr. Porter met us at the entrance, briefcase in hand, eyes clear and focused. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't. No one is ever ready to hear their child argue that they're unfit to live their own life. But I nodded anyway. Some things you face because turning away would break something even more important than your pride. Inside, Daniel sat on one side of the room, Melissa beside him, impeccably dressed in soft beige, a color chosen to convey kindness, neutrality, concern. She glanced at me with a small, professional smile. Daniel didn't meet my eyes. The judge entered. A woman with silver hair pulled tightly back, her face lined with the kind of experience that doesn't tolerate theatrics. She called the room to order, and Melissa straightened, ready to perform. Their attorney spoke first. He described me as a lovely woman entering a stage of vulnerability, using a tone usually reserved for reading bedtime stories. He referenced the fall, the supposed confusion, the growing difficulty of managing my affairs. As he talked, Melissa nodded at every line, placing a sympathetic hand on Daniel's arm. Daniel sat very still. Then it was their turn to speak. Melissa rose. Her voice trembled, artfully, deliberately. "We adore Margaret," she began. "She means so much to our family. But her health has been declining. She forgets things. She puts herself at risk. We're terrified something terrible will happen if we don't intervene." She spoke with such conviction that someone who didn't know her, might have believed every word. The judge took notes, expression unreadable. Then Daniel stood. He wasn't a good liar. His voice wavered, his hands fidgeted. "Mom has always been strong," he said. "But lately, it seems harder for her. She fell. Twice. She mixes things up sometimes, and I just want her safe. We both do." He finally looked at me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt, maybe even regret. But it vanished under Melissa's approving smile. When the judge turned to me, the room felt impossibly still. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "you may respond." I rose slowly, using the cane not because I needed it, but because I refused to make my steadiness look like defiance. I wanted truth, not dramatics. "Your Honor," I began, my voice calm. "Getting older is not the same as losing oneself. I had one fall. The doctor confirmed it was an accident and that I'm fully competent. I pay my bills. I manage my home. I take care of myself." I saw Melissa shift, uneasy. "And I am not confused," I continued, "but I have been misrepresented." Mr. Porter stepped forward. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to play a recording recently discovered in Mrs. Hale's home." The judge nodded. He pressed play. Melissa's voice filled the courtroom. Cold, calculating, confident. "This fall was a blessing. She can't manage on her own. We can show the court she's declining. It shouldn't be hard." Daniel's quiet agreement. His silence when he should have objected. His weakness used as leverage. When the recording stopped, the room was so silent I could hear my own pulse. The judge looked at Melissa first. Her expression didn't soften. It sharpened. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "do you care to explain this?" Melissa opened her mouth, but no sound came. Daniel's face went pale. The judge leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "This recording suggests intent not to protect, but to control, and possibly to manipulate the court." She glanced at me then, directly, respectfully. "Mrs. Hale, thank you for your clarity today." My hands trembled just slightly, but I kept them folded. For the first time since the fall, I felt the ground beneath my feet steady itself. The truth was no longer just mine. It was in the room now. And it was loud. Judges don't raise their voices when they're truly displeased. They grow quieter, more precise. The judge that morning spoke with a calm so sharp, it felt like a polished blade. "I am denying the petition for guardianship," she said, her gaze fixed on Melissa first, then on Daniel. "The evidence presented shows no basis for claiming Mrs. Hale is incapacitated. In fact," she tapped the papers before her, "the medical report and recorded conversation suggest the petition may have been motivated by something other than concern." Melissa's lips parted, but no sound escaped. Daniel looked like a man who'd taken a step onto ice that cracked beneath him. The judge continued. "Mrs. Hale is competent. She is capable. She is maintaining her home and affairs. This court will not remove her rights." My cane rested lightly against my hand. I didn't lean on it. I stood tall, steady, not triumphant, simply present. "Furthermore," the judge added, "this court is deeply troubled by the recording." Her eyes narrowed at Melissa. "It suggests deliberate manipulation and an intent to mislead. Guardianship petitions are not tools for convenience or control." Melissa swallowed hard, a tiny flicker of fear crossing her face. Daniel shifted beside her. I could see the shame blooming in his expression. Slow, dawning, painful. The kind of shame that comes when you finally see the cost of your silence. The judge turned to Mr. Porter. "Mrs. Hale maintains her rights in full. Should further petitions be filed without substantial justification, This court may consider penalties. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until that moment. It left me slowly, like air escaping from a long-sealed room. "Mrs. Hale," the judge said, softening just slightly, "you've shown admirable clarity today. Take care of yourself, and take care with whom you trust." I nodded. "I will, Your Honor." The gavel struck. The echo rolled through the courtroom like a quiet storm breaking. As people began to rise, Melissa grabbed her purse with stiff fingers. Her polished composure had cracked. Not shattered, but cracked enough for truth to seep through. She avoided my eyes, busying herself with nothing. Her silence was no longer a weapon. It was a shield. Daniel stood frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, he approached me. "Mom," he began. I waited. His face tightened, as if forming the words physically hurt. I didn't know she said those things. I didn't know she meant it that way. But he had known enough. Or he should have. "You signed the petition," I said gently. He closed his eyes, exhaling, like a man realizing he'd lost something he didn't mean to gamble. "I thought we were helping you. I thought Melissa said it was the right thing, that you'd be safer." "She said many things," I replied. "You listened to all of them but mine." He flinched, not from the volume, but from the truth. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And for once it sounded real, raw, unpolished. But apologies don't undo signatures, or silence, or years of slow erosion disguised as concern. Ruth appeared at my side, her hand brushing my arm. "Ready to go home?" she asked. I nodded. Home, my home, still mine. As we walked toward the exit, I didn't look back at Daniel and Melissa. Not out of spite, out of understanding. There are moments in life when you finally see people clearly. Not the people you hoped they were, but the people they chose to be. I stepped into the hallway, the air warmer than the courtroom, and felt something inside me settle. Not victory, not bitterness. Just certainty. They had tried to take my voice. But today, it had carried further than their lies ever could. And that was enough. In the days after the hearing, the house felt different. Not larger, not brighter. Just mine again. As if the walls had been holding their breath along with me and were now slowly exhaling. I moved through the rooms with a steadier step, my cane tapping lightly on the floorboards, the sound no longer a reminder of weakness, but of ownership. I spent the first morning doing something small, yet strangely symbolic. Opening the curtains in every room. Sunlight spilled over the furniture, touched the old photographs, warmed the places that had felt cold for too long. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched or measured. I felt present. Ruth visited, carrying lemon muffins she insisted were medicinal. She settled at my kitchen table, eyeing me the way a general inspects a soldier after battle. "You look taller," she said. "I feel lighter," I admitted. She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Just don't let them slip back in with softer tactics. People don't give up control because a judge scolds them." I knew she was right. Melissa would return to her home, lick her wounds quietly, and begin rewriting the story in softer strokes. Daniel would be lost between guilt and loyalty, pulled in two directions he didn't fully understand. But me, I finally understood something essential. I didn't have to play the role they'd handed me. Later that afternoon, I sat with Mr. Porter to finalize the paperwork we had put in motion before the hearing. He handed me the updated will, the healthcare directive, and the documentation confirming a small trust I'd created for Chloe. One Melissa could never touch. "This ensures your decisions stand," he said. "No one can override them. Not without your consent and not without a court seeing compelling evidence, which they won't. I traced the edges of the documents, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in. Not triumph, not revenge. Stability. "Thank you," I said. "You did the hard part," he replied. On the way home, I stopped by a garden shop and bought a new pair of gloves. My husband used to tease me about how I wore through gardening gloves faster than most people wore through shoes. I smiled at the memory, bittersweet and warm. When I returned, Daniel's car was parked at the curb. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the crisp air. He looked up when he heard my steps and hurried over, hands half raised as if he wasn't sure whether to hug me or keep a respectful distance. "Mom," he said quietly, "I came to see if you're all right." "I'm fine, Daniel." He nodded, eyes downcast. The silence stretched, but I didn't rush to fill it. I had spent too many years cushioning his discomforts. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry. For everything." His voice cracked. I didn't know how far Melissa was willing to go. I should have stopped it. I should have listened to you. I looked at him, not the man he'd become under Melissa's shaping hand, but the boy he once was. The boy who trusted me, who believed I could fix anything. "You should have," I said softly. Honesty didn't need sharpness. It only needed clarity. "But now you know." He wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. "I want to make it right. I don't know how yet, but I want to." "That's your work to do," I replied. "Not mine." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth even as it stung. "Can I still visit?" "Of course," I said. "But on different terms." He exhaled, a long, trembling breath, and for the first time in years he looked like someone standing on the threshold of growing up, at 42. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. The distance between us was no longer punishment. It was space for him to understand his own choices. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it at the table with the window open. The cool air carried the faint sound of children playing down the street. I listened, letting the noise settle somewhere deep inside me. I knew life wouldn't suddenly become easy. Melissa would circle back, carefully, quietly. Daniel would falter again. People don't untangle themselves overnight. But the balance had shifted, not in the courts, in me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone who had chosen her own life again, not someone waiting for others to decide it for her. The house was quiet the next morning, but not the uneasy quiet of the weeks before. This was a different silence, warm, familiar, like an old friend settling into the chair beside me. I moved slowly through the kitchen, opening the windows just an inch to let in the early breeze. It carried the smell of damp leaves and chimney smoke, the kind of scent that belongs only to neighborhoods where people have lived long enough to remember each other's stories. I set the kettle on the stove and waited for it to hum. Waiting no longer felt like something being done to me. It felt like something I had chosen. My time was mine again. My mornings, my thoughts, my decisions. All the things Melissa tried to shrink into something fragile. I opened the cupboard and reached for the old teacup with the faint blue flowers. A wedding gift, almost 45 years ago. My husband always said it made tea taste better. I don't know if that was true, but holding it now made me feel grounded, as if a part of him stood somewhere nearby, watching with that gentle smile he carried through our hardest years. I poured the tea and sat by the window overlooking the yard. The roses I had trimmed last week were already showing small signs of new growth, tiny red points pushing through the stems. Life returning exactly where it had been cut back. I smiled at that, Nature has its own way of reminding you that pruning isn't punishment, it's preparation. The phone buzzed once on the table. A message from Chloe. "Grandma, can we visit after school? I miss you." Just that. Simple. Honest. Untouched by adult hands. I wrote back, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm home." Home. Still my favorite word. I set the phone aside and wrapped my hands around the warm cup. I felt no triumph, no gloating. Those emotions burn too fast and leave nothing behind. What I felt was steadier, deeper, something like the quiet settling of dust after a long storm. A truth coming back into place. People think dignity is loud, a speech, a confrontation, a final sweeping gesture. But real dignity is quieter. It's choosing your own way after someone tried to choose it for you. It's standing up not because anyone is watching, but because you remember you deserve to stand. Later today, I would bake cookies for the children, maybe prune a few more roses. Maybe sit on the porch with Ruth and let her scold me about wearing sensible shoes. Ordinary tasks, simple moments, but they belong to me, not borrowed, not supervised. Mine. I took a sip of tea. It tasted exactly as it should. The fall had hurt. Yes, their betrayal hurt even more. But neither broke me. And in the end, I didn't win by fighting harder. I won by refusing to disappear. A soft breeze moved the curtains. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, followed by laughter. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, letting the moment settle like warm sunlight on my skin. I was still here, still steady, still myself. And that was the quiet triumph they never expected. If my story meant something to you, if it stirred even a small part of your own strength, share it, leave a comment, or follow for more.